Okay, anytime I find out that someone wants to go to Ranger School, I offer to send them my day-by-day account that I wrote right after I graduated from Ranger School. In it, I go through every single day I was in the school, with the exception of a few days which are completely lost in my memory, or I omitted them because they were just repeats of the previous day. A lot of people have told me that they really love it and they share it with others, so I figured I would share it with you all. If you're interested in the Army's Ranger School and what goes on there, I hope you find this entertaining. Please remember to like and subscribe and share the video with others. In this video, I'm just going to go through the introduction and day 0. If there's enough views and likes, I'll go ahead and keep making more videos going through more days. Also, if you're not on the distro, there's a link in the description. Just drop your email in there and you can sign up for free. All right, let's get started. Here's my introduction. Most books on Ranger School fall into one of two categories. The first category is the type of book designed to help you get ready for Ranger School. It will provide you tips on what gear to bring and might tell a few anecdotes. The other type of book provides very technical advice on how to write operations orders and how to do land navigation and exact workout plans to follow, stuff like that. I read all these books before I went to Ranger School, and all I can say is that all they did was make me nervous. They certainly didn't help me when I was getting yelled at during RAP week, or dying of exhaustion walking up the sides of mountains at Camp Merrill, or when I was sleepwalking in Florida. And here's the thing, no book will help you in those situations. This account is just a collection of my memories from Ranger School. I'm not going to tell you what to do or how to be successful. You don't need a book to help you pass Ranger School. The purpose of this account is just to tell you about my experience and help you know what to expect. This book is an accurate record of my daily experience at Ranger School, and your experience will be different, but it won't be that different. Ranger School is one of the toughest, if not the toughest school in the Army, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. In every Ranger graduating class, there are soldiers who most people thought never had a chance. There are graduates who barely passed the PT test, who they may have failed the course multiple times. Maybe they completed the entire course only to be told that they had to start over from day 1. What all graduates have in common is that they have a relentless determination to succeed and to not quit. One of my best friends spent 228 days at Ranger School, which is only a 61-day course. He started Ranger School almost 6 months before me, and we graduated on the same day. After graduation, I asked him, "How did you do it? How did you keep pushing yourself through each of these phases?" He turned to me and he said, "I wouldn't care if they kicked me out. In fact, I wanted them to kick me out, but I wasn't going to quit. No matter what, I wasn't going to quit." More than anything, Ranger School will teach you about yourself. No one can tell you ahead of time if you'll pass Ranger School. The only way to find out if you have what it takes is to volunteer to go. Ranger School is the Army's, quote, premier leadership school. It's now open to all branches and also open to women. Ranger School has students from every service and from many different countries. It's 61 days long. It takes place in 4 phases in 4 different locations. The Ranger Assessment Phase, which is also known as RAP Week, takes place at Camp Rogers, which is located on Fort Benning, Georgia. The Darby Phase takes place at Camp Darby, which is also located on Fort Benning. The Mountain Phase takes place at Camp Merrill in Dahlonega, Georgia, and the final phase, the Swamp Phase, takes place at Camp Rudder, which is located on Eglin Air Force Base in Florida's Panhandle. The course begins with a grueling 4-day experience known as RAP Week. The only purpose of RAP Week is to ensure that only the prepared students actually enter the course. During RAP Week, students are pushed physically and mentally. Students must show the ability to navigate across country, operate weapons and radios, and a willingness not to quit. RAP Week is a wake-up call to many students, and only 1/3 of the students actually get past RAP Week. After RAP Week, Ranger School uses the quote, crawl, walk, run method to teach its students. In the Derby phase, Ranger instructors, also known as RIs, are very hands-on. RIs teach the students everything they will need to know to succeed in the course. RIs will show the students exactly what to do and how to do it. This is the crawl phase. The walk phase is the mountain phase. During mountains, RIs give the students a little more freedom to execute missions, but they are always correcting, teaching, and coaching. During the Florida phase, RIs are almost completely hands-off. They're hands-off during planning and during execution of the missions. After the mission, they'll give some critiques, but they'll let the students discuss the mission amongst themselves. All right. The rest of this account is a day-by-day story, essentially, of Ranger School. I'll go through each of the phases, and I'll explain exactly what it was like. For those who are unfamiliar with some of the terminology, I'll try to kind of explain it as we go. There's a lot of acronyms and jargon and stuff, but I'll stop and try to explain what, kind of what stuff is. All right, so here we go. This is Rap Week, Day 0. I arrived at Camp Rogers at around 1000 or 1100 hours. I had 2 full duffel bags, a full rucksack, and an assault pack. I got in line with the other lieutenants from the Infantry Basic Officer Leader course. That was the course that I had just graduated from. All the lieutenants that go through IBOLC, Infantry Basic Officer Leader course, all the lieutenants that graduate from there go to Ranger School. It's kind of a big deal if you don't want to go. If you try to opt out, it's kind of a big deal. So basically everybody goes, more than 99%. All right, so I got in line to get my medical papers from the cadre that had brought a bunch of medical papers that we had to have. So once I got my papers, I waited in line to go into the main multi-purpose room, which contained the in-processing stations. I walked up to the first table, and I was asked a series of questions. The first question was some sort of yes or no question, to which I responded, yeah. An RI took issue with this and yelled, "How about yes, Sergeant? And how about you stand at parade rest when talking to an NCO?" I immediately snapped to parade rest and sounded off with, "Roger that, Sergeant." At Ranger School, there is no rank, only students and RIs. It didn't matter if the RI was a sergeant and the student was a captain. RIs run the show. I went through the stations and was told to go to the medical clinic on the other side of the camp to get my urine tested. There was apparently some extra protein in my urine or something during my last physical exam, and the medics wanted to ensure that I was healthy enough to start the course. So I walked over and gave them a sample and received the okay. I made my way back to the formation and waited nervously. I was determined not to try to game the system at all during Ranger School. There are various ways to, for example, get into the same company as your friends. I decided to go with whatever I got. I wanted the full Ranger School experience, and part of that was just accepting the randomness. As it turned out, I ended up in the same company as Patrick, who I knew from IBOLC. Patrick and I had a very odd relationship. He was super squared away, very intelligent, no bullshit, common sense guy. He was a West Pointer. I wasn't sure where I stood in his eyes, but at IBOLC, we never really seemed to get along. I think he lost respect for me during a 4-mile road march where I really struggled to keep up with the group, even though I eventually finished with everybody. After that, he was always kind of mean to me. I didn't appreciate that. But over the next couple of days, I realized he was a really great guy. He was really passionate about what he did. All right, after I arrived back from the medical station, I waited around at the large collection of bags for what seemed like a really long time. There were RIs walking around in black Ranger t-shirts and students nervously making notes about how miserable the next months were going to be. Finally, the RIs began splitting everyone up into companies. The way they did this was to call people up into formations in categories. So first they would call everyone from Ranger Regiment, and they would split those guys up into 3 companies. And then they'd call everybody from the regular army up, maybe all the enlisted soldiers, and say, and split them between the 3 companies. And then all the soldiers from foreign armies, and they would split them into the 3 companies. And then all of the lieutenants from IBOLC and split them up into 3 companies. Presumably, this was to ensure that every company had an even cross-section of categories. So you didn't have all the foreign students in one company and all the lieutenants in another and things like that. It makes sense. All right, so when they called up a category of soldiers, everyone in the category formed up on the lawn facing the multi-purpose room. So let's say there were 6 ranks. The first 2 ranks went to Alpha, the second 2 to Bravo, the third to Charlie. When our rank was assigned to Alpha Company, we double timed over to the designated Alpha area in the grass off to our right. We waited there until everyone was assigned to a company. Once that was completed, we were told to get out a black pen and prepare to move into the multi-purpose room, which is when I realized that all of my pens were in my gear and I didn't have any in my uniform. So I was so concentrated on making sure that I had all my gear for the layout, which we're going to get to in a minute, that I had forgotten to keep a pen on me, which is something every officer should have at all times. So I was like super nervous. I frantically asked those around me as subtly as possible if I could borrow one. Of course, nobody had an extra. So I asked the guy next to me if we could share, and he didn't have a problem with that. Now we moved into the multi-purpose room, which was designed to hold maybe 300 people, but there were well over 400 people. A lot of students ended up standing, but I was in the front row. Of course, the guy with no pen is in the front row. We were given a green card with the basic biographical data on it. Put your name, put your date of birth, your social security number, etc. So I shared the pen and we got the information filled out. We received some basic information about the course, and then we rushed back outside. Got back into formation, got a quick brief from our company RIs, and we were told to double time at all times, to always move with a Ranger buddy, to give the RIs military courtesy, and that we had to know the Ranger Creed by heart when they gave us some other basic rules of the camp. None of this was a surprise. We moved back over to our gear, spread out, and dumped everything on the ground, and the layout inspection began. Now, the layout at Ranger School is a big deal. You have to have all of the required equipment, and if you're missing an item, you're given a major minus. So if you get 3 major minuses in a phase, you automatically recycle that phase. If you get 3 major minuses in wrap week, they're just going to send you home. So I wasn't missing anything during the layout, luckily. Although they did challenge my boots. They tried to say like they weren't like regulation or something. They were totally regulation. Anyway. So I just confidently said, these boots are regulation. And they didn't push any further than that. So I guess I got lucky. All right. So we gathered up all our stuff. We took it into the barracks, which was immediately off to our right-hand side. Alpha Company seemed to be in the best spot geographically because it was the closest to the company barracks. Oh, so it was the barracks that was closest to the multi-purpose room. But the company area was just a rectangular space. It's under an overhead covering, and the ground is all gravel. So I don't know if you've ever been smoked before, which is when, for my non-military audience, getting smoked is when the person in charge is making everyone do like push-ups and flutter kicks and squats and low crawls and all these other things. Getting smoked on gravel sucks. So I went to air assault school, and I had gotten smoked on gravel there, and I knew how bad it was, so I was not looking forward to this. At least it was covered, so if it rained, we weren't going to get wet. All right, after the layout, moved all our gear into the barracks, and we locked it in our lockers. The barracks was very small. It's nothing more than a rectangular room with bunks lining the walls on each side. The middle walkway was only large enough for one person with all their gear, maybe 2 people if you had to squeeze. The lockers are super close together, and so close that only one person can access their locker at a time. They were barely big enough to fit all of our gear. Both of these factors combined proved to be a very big inconvenience. All right. If I recall correctly, the RIs did give us some time to sort out all of our stuff and get settled. After we were settled in, we went back outside and ran to the mess hall, which was only about 150 meters away. We were lined up in front of the mess hall and said the Ranger Creed. The way this is done at Ranger School, and this is done every time before chow, and in the mornings when you're out in the field, is you line up, you say the Ranger Creed. So 6 volunteers rush out to the front of the formation, and each of the volunteers, there's 6 stanzas of the Ranger Creed, and each of the volunteers leads one of the stanzas. So the first ranger will go through the first stanza of the Ranger Creed. The second student will lead them through the second stanza of the Ranger Creed, and so on. I have the creed kind of written here. I'm not going to go through it. You can look up the Ranger Creed. All right, so the first couple of times, but the thing is, the whole class has to say it all together. All right, so the first couple of times we tried this, someone inevitably either did not know the creed or they messed it up. So every time that happened, the whole company had to do push-ups, and the person who messed it up was replaced by somebody else. Once the creed was completed, everyone had to take turns doing 6 pull-ups and then got in line for chow. The ones who volunteered to recite the creed were always the first ones to eat. Needless to say, I volunteered to do the creed basically every time because I wanted to eat first. All right, where are we? Anyway, we said the creed, we lined up, we rushed through chow. We got a pretty good amount of food, but we had to eat in a very little amount of time. You're not allowed to talk. We weren't allowed to look up. Just eat, get out. Once you're done eating, you had to wait outside for your ranger buddy, and then the two of you had to run back to the company area. At this point, you didn't have like an assigned ranger buddy. It was basically just like wait for somebody and then go. Ranger buddy is just kind of a generic term. All right, so I linked up with a buddy. We ran back. We were the first ones done, so we knew we had some time to run in, use the latrine, and kind of wait for everybody else. Once everyone was done and back in the company area, we moved to the multi-purpose room and got a briefing about, something, whatever the next couple days were going to happen. After that, we were released to the barracks for the night. All right, so they're not allowed to mess with us. They were not allowed to mess with us that first night because we had a PT test in the morning and they wanted to give everybody a fair shot. We did, however, have to keep a fire guard, which is pretty much standard practice everywhere in the military. I got in my bunk, quickly fell asleep, wondering what the next few months were going to be like. All right, so that's the kind of the introduction to this account and day 0. And every day of Ranger School, I kind of go through in this, very minor details, going through everything I remember about what happened, who I talked to for every phase, the ins and outs of every patrol, lessons we learned. So if you guys like this, if you want me to make more, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If it gets some traction, then I'll keep making more days. Make sure you check out the distro. Make sure you get on the distro, and I will see you later. Thanks.